Truly, I love it when Ross Bjork starts talking about the money that is being paid to athletes playing sports because, frankly, we just don't get enough of that from athletic directors. Let's talk about how they're divvying up the $20.5 million that they're going to start revenue sharing with their student athletes and who's going to get most of this. What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on the step mill. If this is your first time watching Adapt and Respond, thank you for joining us here. We talk college football year round. If that is something you're into, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like this video, and answer the question in the comments below. Do you think that the way in which Ohio State is choosing to divvy up its $20.5 million in revenue is the best way to go? I'm also going to take this opportunity to remind you, we got an audio podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and I'm giving away stickers to anybody who goes to Apple, goes to Spotify, leaves 5-star reviews at both, and then fills out the form in the description below where I could send you a physical sticker as a measure of my thanks. Trying to get to 500 ratings on Apple in particular before we get to the season. We'll see how close we get. I like the way that Ross Bjork and Ohio State are choosing to divvy up their $20.5 million. Now, off the rip, he's very clear when he's talking with Dave Biddle over Bucknuts. They are going to put $2.5 million toward scholarships, 91 scholarships, right? Which I think is also pretty cool because one of the things that people have said about, well, name, image, and likeness is that it feels like the education is coming secondary. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's kind of how that works. I've often said, you go to school to get a job. If you have a job at school, fine, that's great. I don't believe that you need to get a degree for a degree's sake. As a matter of fact, I got a few of them. Do they help me in my job? Something, sorta, maybe. Is it worth the money that it costs in some cases to get one? No, not really. But if it is what floats your boat, then go do it. And if you can get paid and go to school, go do that too. But I do think the getting paid part needs to come before the going to school part because, well, we use money to buy things. We don't use an education itself to buy things. It makes us smarter about the things we buy and about the purchases we make, investments we make. But there's also this thing called a public library where you can get a lot of that information for free. You just got to know where to look, right? And that's what college is really good about, showing you where to look and in some cases teaching you how to study, although I don't think many colleges do a great job of teaching people how to study, especially when you're talking about taking tests that are a measure of what your short-term knowledge is, not what your long-term knowledge is. I keep going on about pedagogy because I'm passionate about it, but this is also me looking to be an English professor some years ago and having some things to say about it. So Ross Bjork says $2.5 million of the $20.5 million is going to go to scholarships. It means they got about $18.5 million, give or take, or $18 million, to divvy up among 4 sports. And he said it's women's volleyball, it's women's basketball, it's men's basketball, and it's football. That's where they're going to see the majority of the revenue sharing go. And I think that's kind of cool. You're citing 2 women's sports, 2 big women's sports at Ohio State that are important to you, but also you're trying to be compliant with Title IX in as much as anybody is. I haven't seen enough of that conversation, right? We already know that this was the House versus NCAA settlement was going to be met with some pushback from Title IX lawyers and folks that are fans of the law, right? Are you doing this equitably? Are you really overcompensating for someone that played football versus someone who was a star and played basketball, right? I think that's important. We're also talking about a dude that was clear last year about the money that they were paying, and he also didn't want to get into how they're divvying up the money in particular among the teams. But you could see, football is the driving engine at Ohio State, just like it's the driving engine anywhere else. I would expect, and I think even most fans of women's volleyball and women's basketball would expect for football to take up the majority of that money. And you're also thinking about this from a standpoint of football in many cases allows for the funding of other things. Like I'll never forget, I was covering the OU women's softball team about 10 years ago. And this is at a time when Kehlani Ricketts was the best 2-way player in the sport. She could pitch, throw 70 miles an hour, and she could hit dingers. But one of the things that Patty would go out of her way to say is we can do some really cool stuff and have the kind of team we have because Bob and Lincoln are doing their jobs over there winning football games and getting people to come see them. And some 90,000 people showing up at Oklahoma for home games, and then the millions that watch them on television every Saturday in the fall. That money really does go downhill. And I thought it was a great example. And I'm going to pick on Oklahoma because I know more about it than I do Ohio State's machinations, but you'll get here because I think it's about the same. When Bob Stoops was hired to be the head coach at Oklahoma by President David Boren and athletic director Joe Castiglione, one of the things that David Boren had told Castiglione is, look, I can't give you any money because we don't have any to give you, but I can promise you that any money you make, I'm not going to take from you. We're going to let you operate like an independent business of sorts, right? So about the time that Bob gets that train running, they win the 2000 national championship. They make themselves more or less the furniture in big postseason football, playing for championships each and every year. You got to see not only the athletic department make money, but you got to see the athletic department subsidize the university and parts of it. That's what football can do, and I'm sure that's what football does for Ohio State. So everybody's pulling in the same direction. It's one of the reasons that I like talking about Ohio State so much is in an age where things feel a little bit helter-skelter, in an age where people are really pulling at each other, trying to get the most out of a little bit, Ohio State has always been really good about pulling in the same direction, right? They've always been really good about, we don't care as long as you win. We will do almost anything to make sure we win. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is, doesn't matter who the running back is, head coach, none of it. Are we winning football games? Are we winning championships? Because that's what we're about. And that hasn't changed for them in over 100 years. Right? It's one of the reasons I really enjoy talking about that program. It's at a time when racism was a big deal in our sports and segregation is a big deal in our sports. Ohio State was like, nah, can you play? Because if you can play, we'll get you up here. You know what I'm saying? Jesse Owens, come on down. Big Bill Bell, come on down. Paul Warfield, come on down. You know, Rudy Hubbard, who was head coach at FAMU, running back coach for Woody Hayes for years. On and on it goes, right? That's not their get down. Their get down is W's. We want more wins. We don't want any losses. Can you do that for us? And the revenue sharing is just another example of that, right? It is them going, okay, how do we do this in a way that is equitable? How do we do this in a way that is fair? But how do we do this in a way in which we can ensure that each one of our programs has the best opportunity to win championships? Because at the end of all of this, that's what we're here for. Winning also brings you in money. That's why it's not that big a deal. It's right. Ryan Day making $12.5 million a year, and nobody's sneezing about it. Even though there are those that believe that Ryan Day's born on third base. He inherited a really great program from Urban Meyer. And I'm going, I don't know, man. Count the number of losing seasons that Ohio State has had. You know, it's not a job that people get to have very long, especially if you're not winning. So one leads to the other, needs to the other. The machine itself at Ohio State is always going to be working. It's always going to be running. And I think this is another example of that. Ross Bjork, who had to stop at Ole Miss, had to stop at A&M, gets to fire Jimbo Fisher for $80 million, gets to hire Mike Elko, gets up out of there, goes to Ohio State, and in short friggin' order wins a national championship, right? All while overseeing what I think is one of the most important athletic departments in the entire country. You can tell me, though, as you are taking a look at this, do you think that they should be spending it all on football? Do you think they should be spending less on football? Let me know in the comments below.